Yesterday, on my way home from work, I happened to run into an old close friend of mine who used to work with me last year. We stood and chatted for a while, and she told me that she had just broken up with her boyfriend. She said it was only after everything ended that she realized he was a player, someone who got close to her and stayed in the relationship mainly to take advantage of her feelings. Hearing that suddenly reminded me of something. Last year, when I was still working with both of them, I did notice some signs that things were not quite right. It was just that, back then, they were not clear enough for me to say anything to her. Actually, this kind of thing does not only happen in romantic relationships. It can happen in any kind of relationship, including friendships. If someone has bad intentions, there will always be signs that show up pretty clearly. That is also the reason why I wanted to make this video, so that everyone can learn to recognize those signs as early as possible and protect themselves better in their relationships. Let's get started. Sign number 1. After a conversation, you often feel like you were the one at fault. Back when I was still working with that friend and her boyfriend, I directly witnessed many conversations between the two of them. In those moments, my friend would simply express things that made her feel uncomfortable. Her tone was calm, she never raised her voice, and she never blamed him. She just shared how she felt, hoping to be understood and supported. But the response from the other side was pretty upsetting. He always had a way to deny the issue, change the subject, or insist that she was overthinking, blowing things out of proportion, or completely misunderstanding his point. The conversation usually did not go very far, and by the end of it, she was always the one left rethinking everything. She would end up questioning herself. Am I being too dramatic? Am I being too picky? Am I too sensitive? Am I the one making this relationship tense? Meanwhile, his behavior never changed. From a psychological perspective, this is how a toxic person avoids responsibility while still maintaining control in the relationship. They do not need to explain or apologize. All they need is to make the other person doubt their own feelings. The American Psychological Association, APA, calls this gaslighting, a subtle form of emotional manipulation that causes the victim to gradually lose trust in themselves and become more dependent on the abuser. Victims are often told they are too sensitive, crazy, or overreacting whenever they express emotions. The consequences: the victim may fall into anxiety, depression, a drop in self-confidence, and begin to question their own worth. If most of your conversations end with you thinking you are the one in the wrong, while the other person never changes their behavior, that is already enough of a sign to be cautious about the relationship. Sign number 2. Always taking, rarely giving. Still thinking back to the time I worked with that friend and her boyfriend, there was something that kept happening in the way they interacted. Whenever he was under pressure, tired, or going through something difficult, she was always the one to listen, rearrange her time, and even put aside her own work just to be there and support him. She got used to being the one who gave more, thinking that in a relationship, caring a little extra was normal. And in the early stages, this kind of imbalance was not easy to notice. But the other way around was very different. Whenever she was tired, needed someone to talk to, or just needed him to be there, he would often be too busy, give half-hearted responses, or quickly turn the conversation back to his own problems. He would only show up when he needed something and fade away just as fast when it was her turn to need support. What stood out was that this was not a one-time thing. It happened often enough to form a pattern one person got used to giving, and the other got used to only receiving. Over time, this imbalance became the default state of the relationship. From a psychological point of view, this is a sign of an exploitative relationship. A person with bad intentions often keeps the connection going only because of the benefits they receive, not because of any mutual bond. They have no reason to leave, since they are still gaining something, but they also have no motivation to give anything back. The key sign to look for is how the relationship reacts when you start to pull back. If the connection weakens the moment you stop giving, That is a clear sign that your value in their eyes depends only on what you are able to provide. A healthy relationship always has some level of mutual exchange. When giving only flows one way for too long, that is a serious red flag that should not be ignored. Sign number 3. Using guilt to manipulate. Let us go back to my friend's story. After a few times when she could not meet his expectations, I started to notice her reactions after those conversations where she was left feeling powerless. There were moments when she had just finished a phone call with him and immediately turned to me saying, "I made him sad again." It turned out that he had asked to meet or asked for a favor, but she was busy or had a valid reason not to be there. His response would be something like, "Well, I understand. I guess I am not as important as your other things." Or, "It's fine. Just take care of your stuff. I'm used to this." Right after that, she would start questioning herself. She would ask if she had been selfish or too cold. Basically, she was overwhelmed with guilt. In psychology, this is called guilt tripping, a manipulative behavior that uses guilt to control someone. It is toxic because it forces the other person to suppress their own needs in order to satisfy someone else's demands. If you often find yourself changing your decisions just to stop feeling guilty, that is a clear sign that your emotions are being used against you in the relationship. Sign number 4. Blaming others, avoiding responsibility. Still, on the topic of my friend, there was one time when she had planned to meet up with her boyfriend. He showed up late, leaving her standing outside in the rain for almost an hour. But when he finally arrived, instead of saying sorry, he told her, "Why did you not find a place with a roof to wait? Do you like making yourself suffer just to make me feel guilty?" Or when he forgot something important she had asked him to do, his reply would be, "You told me while I was busy. Do you not know how to choose the right time to talk?" These things sound sharp. No yelling, no insults, but just enough to flip the conversation around. From him being late or forgetting something, the focus would quickly shift to what she had done wrong. After each of these incidents, she would be the one doing all the explaining, trying to calm things down, and apologizing first, even though she was not the one who caused the problem. In his world, every mistake had a reason, and that reason always pointed back to her. Psychologically, this is known as a blame culture, a pattern of consistently shifting responsibility onto someone else. Instead of owning up to their part, a person like this creates an environment where they are always excused. Every failure comes with an explanation involving the situation, the tone, or the attitude of the other person and never themselves. If you often find yourself taking responsibility for things that were not your fault just to avoid conflict or keep the peace, that is a sign that you are being made the scapegoat in this relationship, and it is time to take a serious look at what is really happening. Sign number 5. Impulsive, rude, or hurtful behavior. There was a time I worked with a colleague who, at first, seemed very caring and always offered to help me. Nothing felt wrong initially. But one day, my vehicle broke down and I got a ride home from him right at rush hour. The traffic was a mess. Everything was at a standstill. After waiting a bit, he started to lose his patience. He honked nonstop, then suddenly stepped out of the car, started yelling, and aggressively kicked another car in front of us, even though there had been no accident or argument. It was all because he could not manage his frustration. He did not care about the consequences, but the people around him felt embarrassed, disrespected, and even humiliated. After that day, I chose to keep my distance, because I realized that someone who loses control that easily could direct that same anger at me anytime. In psychology, this kind of behavior is called emotional impulsivity, acting out of raw emotions like anger or irritation without thinking about the consequences. It creates an emotionally unsafe environment for those around them. When you are around someone like that, You find yourself watching your words, tiptoeing around their reactions, or shrinking yourself just to avoid triggering their outbursts. If you are constantly adjusting yourself to avoid someone else's rude explosions, that is a clear sign that the relationship is causing emotional harm and needs to be reevaluated. Sig number 6. Always needing to be the center of attention. In my family, I have a cousin who, every time we have a family gathering or sit down to eat or talk, the moment someone starts saying just a few words, she immediately interrupts. She talks louder, tells longer stories, and often ends with lines like, "That's not even worth telling," or, "Now my story is what really matters." Sometimes, when someone in the family shares something sad, she gives a little laugh and says something harsh like, "You're sad over that?" Then she jumps right into telling her own story, one that is worse or sadder, to pull all the attention back to herself. This makes the other person feel pushed aside, and like their story was just a burden to everyone else. But when she gets interrupted, her attitude changes immediately. She becomes annoyed, starts making sarcastic remarks, and throws shade at the person who cut her off, as if not being the center of attention was some kind of insult. From a psychological point of view, this is a sign of excessive need for attention, often linked to narcissistic tendencies. People like this feel uncomfortable when they are not in the spotlight, and they do whatever it takes to bring attention back to themselves, even if that means putting down other people's feelings or experiences. If you often get interrupted like that when speaking, or your story gets ignored, and someone's presence always makes you feel smaller, that is a sign the attention is one-sided. Your feelings are not being valued, and that kind of relationship is something you need to take a closer look at. Sig number 7. Not respecting personal boundaries. Continuing with the story of my cousin, there was one time I was talking privately with a friend about her relationship. It was a personal conversation, just between the two of us. But my cousin suddenly walked over, did not ask if it was okay, and jumped right in. She looked at my friend and immediately asked, "You still haven't broken up with that guy?" Before my friend could react, she kept going, "You can tell just by looking something's off with that guy. Just break up already and be done with it." That kind of question did not come from a place of care. It felt more like a harsh interruption into someone else's private matter, full of judgment and decisions made on their behalf, even when they were not ready to open up. Psychologically, this is a sign of someone who does not recognize personal boundaries. Boundaries mean having the right to keep part of your life private, the right to speak when you choose, and the right to say no without having to explain. People who disrespect boundaries treat other people's privacy like something they can question, comment on, or interfere with whenever they want. This sign often shows up when you start keeping things to yourself. If simply choosing not to share something makes the atmosphere tense, that means your boundaries are not being respected. A healthy relationship always gives people their own space. Sig number 8. Lack of true empathy. There was a time when my close friend got scammed and lost a large amount of money. She was panicking, crying as she spoke because she had no idea how to handle it. The first person she reached out to was her boyfriend, hoping for comfort. But his response chilled me. He said, "How could you be so dumb? It was so obvious. How did you fall for that? If it were me, I would never have made that mistake." After the call, she rang me crying and said she felt stupid and worthless for letting it happen. What hurt her even more was that after that, she no longer dared to open up to her boyfriend. Even when she wanted to say something, she felt like she would just be called foolish or told it was her fault, so she chose to stay silent to avoid being hurt again. From a psychological point of view, this is a clear sign of emotional lack of empathy. These people do not put themselves in the other person's shoes. They do not care about the pain someone is going through. They only focus on proving they are right or better than others. Their presence does not comfort, it cuts deeper. And what is more concerning is how this lack of empathy makes you stop sharing. Every time you show weakness, you get judged. Every time you open up, you feel smaller. So eventually, you go quiet, just to protect yourself. When a relationship makes you hide your feelings to feel safe, it no longer has the power to support you emotionally. So we have just gone through all the signs to look out for in this video. Now that you have heard them all, do any of these signs sound familiar to something you have experienced before? If they do, you can share in the comments below so others can read and relate as well. And if you have any questions or concerns about your relationships or emotions, feel free to leave a comment. Who knows, that might become the topic of a future video where we can explore it together in more detail. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the video.